I'm Bronia Arnott, a Senior Research Methodologist with the Research Design Service in the North East and North Cumbria, and this morning I'm going to be giving you an overview of research impact. So impact is defined as a demonstrable contribution that research can make to society and the economy, benefiting individuals, organisations and sometimes whole nations. And it's important to think about generating impact from your research because we all want to make a difference. But generating impact from research is often highly dependent upon the context. It can take a lot of time. It can often comprise a series of very small incremental changes, but it does bring about a difference in the end. And it can involve serendipity to an extent, thinking about individuals whose research has involved developing interventions to encourage people to wear face masks during a pandemic, for example, and then the COVID-19 pandemic comes along and they have a great research impact that they might not have predicted. So it's important to sort of plan, I think, to generate impact, but also realise that it can involve a bit of chance as well. So impact is the outcome, but the process itself is better described as knowledge mobilisation. And knowledge mobilisation can be said to include activities such as engagement, dissemination, co-design and commercialisation. And we're going to talk about some of those activities in the presentation. As I said, I think we need to plan for impact because although things like chance and serendipity are important, there are lots of ways that we can plan for impact as well. So planning for impact involves engaging with research users and identifying potential impacts from the outset. So you can start now to think about how your research might have impact in the future. And planning for impact includes considering the kinds of impact that you're hoping to achieve, the difference that you want to make. What do you want to change? Who do you want the change to be for? To what extent do you want the change to happen? And when would you like to see the change? Those are all things that you can consider now. And when you've started with that endpoint of what you want to change for who, when, and to what extent, work backwards and think about the small steps that you will need to make to get there. The NIHR says that impact, when considering impact and planning for impact, you should be considering engagement, partnerships, context, materials, approach, and timing. And I'm going to consider these next. In terms of engagement, they want you to know who your research users are and also understand the timescales that they are working to. So your research might be of interest to different kinds of audiences, but they might work to different timescales. Some of them might be working very rapidly and expect you to respond on that timescale as well. And knowing that there are different research users out there, different audiences for your research, you also have to think about the fact that they're not only working to different timescales, but that they also might have different evidence needs, and you need to think about how you might meet those evidence needs. As part of your planning to have this research impact, it's important to get the right people involved with the right networks right now from the start. Get those on board who have the right networks, the right knowledge, the right experience. And the NIHR have indicated that they like to see at least 2 of these individuals who could help you to have impact included as co-applicants on the application. So that's something to think about now in the planning stages. And you should be engaging with research users now and keeping them involved throughout the project, and then also beyond the project, because obviously you plan to have impact within the timescale of the project, but there will also probably be impact beyond that timescale as well. And it's important to think about how you will continue to have impact even once the project is finished. And in terms of engaging with research users, think about how you're going to resource that. Make sure that you've included enough of their time and enough money for them to be involved throughout the project. And then thinking about partnerships, it's a good idea to have champions of your research. Obviously, you're going to champion your research, but it's good if you can have other people in other organisations that will be trying to achieve the same things as you are through the research. And it's important to think about seeking out individuals who have the right level of influence in those organisations. So, for example, if somebody is too junior, they might have the time to spend on your research, but they might not have the right level of influence. But if it's somebody too senior, they might have a lot of influence, but they may not have a lot of time to be involved. So it's important to pitch it right. Think about linking up with established networks to try and raise the profile of your research. You could consider working with voluntary and third sector organisations. They often have powerful connections with service users and carers, but they can also have connections with policymakers, which are important too. And again, try and take advantage of existing forums, groups, meetings and events which are already happening. And you can use these to exchange knowledge, to raise awareness of your research, and also get some early feedback about your research ideas or as your results as they progress. It's also important to think about the context of your research when planning for impact. It's important to understand that there may be barriers and facilitators for your research having impact, and these might be cultural, they might be financial, they might be at a service or policy level. And it's important to think about that wider context about planning for your research impact. It's also important to think about contexts in which there is demand for change. If there is somewhere, maybe a third sector organisation that is calling for research in a certain area that you do plan to do a project in, then it's good to have them on board because they're going to be really interested in the results of your study. But you also have to make sure that your research is fit for purpose within those contexts. You need to make sure that you're generating the right evidence for the context. I think it's also important to think about a range of outputs as well when you think about impact. I think you can consider that you will probably have to tailor your outputs to different research users. So that means in some cases that will mean traditional dissemination activities such as research papers, reports and things like that. And if you are producing written materials, do make sure that you use plain English so that's easily understood. And you can involve PPI, patient and public involvement representatives, to try and make sure that your reports are well written in plain English. But I think it's also important to think about different types of outputs to the traditional dissemination activities. I've heard some commissioners recently talking about the fact that they get a lot of reports, a lot of written reports, and they would actually like to see, a video of somebody's research, or they might like to see an animation of your results or something like that. They don't just want yet another pamphlet. So do think outside the box, be creative, consider whether an infographic would be useful, think about maybe sort of using social media in different ways. Again, maybe ask the sort of audiences themselves what they would like to receive so that they're involved from the start and getting the right types of outputs that they want to see. Also think about your approach to impact. Think about how you might best reach your target audiences. You might need to target more than one audience, and you also might try more than one method of engaging with them, and this ensures that you will have more chances of success. Also think about the timing of your research impact activities. While there will probably be a lot of impact at the end of your study and beyond, consider whether there are any sort of quick wins that could be shared with your research users during the study. That helps maintain engagement with them and whets their appetite for the final research impact that's to come. And as I've said, serendipity can be important as well as planning. And it's important that you are able to respond to any opportunities that come up, which could lead to impact, even if it's unexpected and unplanned. In terms of impact, the NIHR website is actually really useful for talking about research impact. It includes 5 most common mistakes that researchers often use when planning for impact and knowledge mobilisation. I would encourage you to read this. I'm just going to go over the 5 most common mistakes, but I would encourage you to read sort of further into it. They say that the top common mistakes are not including the right co-applicants with the right knowledge and the right networks. They've said, you need to involve people from outside of academia and embed your research in the places where it can make a difference. And this should be reflected in your research team. They have suggested you include at least 2 research users as co-applicants, and this can help transform your findings into impact. They've also suggested that you don't delegate impact or dissemination or engagement inappropriately. So I think sometimes there have been examples of a lot of burden for dissemination activities being placed on patient and public representatives or on project managers. And what the NIHR are trying to say now is that they think that this should be something that is prioritised within the team, and it should be contributed to by different members of the team. They've also said that they don't want to see an over-reliance on written documents. So again, think about more innovative and creative ways of sharing your results and of having impact. And they've also said to be aware that you need to provide enough resources for dissemination and engagement and impact. They've suggested considering allocating around 10% of the money in your grant application. That's beyond any resources for public and patient involvement, for open access papers and for conferences. They really want you to be prioritising impact. Again, I will sort of stress the importance of having a look on the NIHR Impact Stories page. It's really interesting to see the different case studies that they've used, different ways that people have had an impact, and find out about some of the creative and innovative ways that they have disseminated their research and had impact. And I think that's all from me, so I'll stop sharing.